do it. Why? Because we don't have a name.
Well, if it isn't the Bratz.
Bratz.
Chloe, you're a genius.
Welcome to the Graveyard Slot, where we talk about movies past their prime time.
Here, we revisit old favorites with a fresh perspective to see if they deserve more credit or if they should stay buried. I'm Sohini.
And I'm Sarah, and today we're talking about Bratz. Before we begin, as we mentioned last time, we want to share with whoever's listening some ways to help the people of Palestine, and we thought we'd share a little more about Project Watermelon, whose efforts are working to support the Palestine Liberation Movement.
Project Watermelon is a grassroots, not-for-profit organization that I and people around me are volunteering for. One of the activities they're currently involved in is providing food, water, and medical aid on the ground. And if you're looking for a concrete way to make an impact, consider donating to their GoFundMe. You can find them and all the relevant links on Instagram at projectwater.melon.
So today we're talking about Bratz, the movie. Bratz has had plenty of offshoots when it comes to movies and various shows featuring characters kids have gotten to know through their dolls. But it wasn't until the late 2000s that they made the first live-action movie. Bratz the movie follows Yasmin, Jade, Sasha, and Chloe as they enter high school and navigate a much more rigid and stifling culture than they've encountered in their younger years. So this was released in 2007, directed by Sean McNamara, who is best known for feature films Soul Surfer and The Miracle Season, but has produced and created shows for networks such as MTV, Nickelodeon, and Cartoon Network, among others. Here's something interesting. The screenplay was by Susan Estel Jansen, who is a producer and writer who worked on Home Improvement, Boy Meets World, and Lizzie McGuire. More importantly, she was a screenwriter on the Lizzie McGuire movie.
Wow!
I did some digging, and part of the writing staff were Adam De La Pena, who has written for Comedy Central, Adult Swim, and various other projects that he created and led, and David Eilenberg, who wrote on various series and executive produced on shows such as Love Island, Queer Eye, Hell's Kitchen, Shark Tank, The Voice, among others. So there are some pretty big names behind this.
Yeah, surprisingly. It's a very varied creative team.
But yeah, these people know what they're doing, and it shows, man.
I guess so. I wonder which one of them came up with the Comic Sans idea.
That kind of genius. We can only guess.
So, maybe unsurprisingly, when Bratz was first released, it was a critical and commercial failure. It got 5 nominations at the 28th Golden Raspberry Awards, including Worst Picture, and currently holds a 10% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. We've previously looked at plenty of similar movies and TV shows aimed at a young female audience, and Bratz seemed like a good candidate to return to and see whether the criticisms aimed at it were valid or influenced by the various biases that tend to sway critics to severely misunderstand stories aimed at this target demographic. So we basically want to see if everyone was misogynistic or not.
I think it's not even just that they're misogynistic. I mean, some of them are, but also they're just stupid.
My theory is just that they don't expect to find anything of value, and so they go in with such a closed mind that even if the value is present right in front of their faces, they still don't recognize it because they're too busy already having formed an opinion.
So I grew up loving this movie, but I haven't seen it as an adult before this rewatch. So I didn't remember much from it except that it's fun. I expected it to not be good. So I did come into it. Maybe I didn't come to it with sexism, but I came into it kind of expecting it to be bad. And it blew me away. So these guys shouldn't have jobs as movie critics if they can't even fucking understand a children's movie. It's not that hard to understand. Anyway, what is your experience with this movie?
It's kind of similar to yours. I also remember really liking it as a kid, though I think maybe I didn't have that same experience of growing up with it. And I also hadn't seen it in a very long time. And I was, like you, going into it kind of nervous about how it would be. But yeah, I also was very pleasantly surprised. I'm very glad that we've potentially found yet another hidden gem that is more than it seems on the surface.
Yeah. Honestly, this obstinate misunderstanding of this movie is exemplified in this review I found from the AV Club. Bratz's strong anti-clique sermonizing would be slightly more convincing if it weren't tethered to a movie romanticizing the most awesome clique ever. Which, like, on the surface is maybe valid, but it's not. Here's the thing. This is one of the only reviews I could find that is actually engaging with the message of the movie, or like any part of the movie. Every other review was just like, these bimbos are sluts and I hate them. Period. And obviously, it's also fueled by the view of the Bratz dolls at the time. Like, they were seen as very provocative, etc. And that is not unattached to racism. The Bratz dolls had characters of color, especially dark-skinned characters, and people were being absolutely awful. The point is, a lot of racism and sexism fueling the view on the dolls, and less so on this movie, because it's not like the movie is exactly like the dolls, but it's definitely there in a lot of the reviews. But this is one of the few reviews I could find that's actually talking about what the movie's about. But even then, the fact that they are only taking the message of the movie as anti-clique, like, misses the entire point. Like, do you not understand?
Like, there's literally a character reading a book. The principal of the high school is reading a book that says how to run a prison, and the only thing they took out of this movie is that it's anti-clique?
It's so dumb. That's my whole takeaway. And also, my takeaway, turns out, people have never had media literacy. It's nothing new. Forget about all of those YouTube videos, those think pieces about how media literacy is, you know, going downhill. People have never had it. Get the fuck out of here. The end.
I agree.
Did your critic have media literacy?
Not one of the reviews that I read. The majority of the reviews I found were also very negative and missing the point of the movie. At this point, I'm just not at all surprised. This is I feel like every movie that we talk about that's like misunderstood, we follow the same pattern. But the specific one that I wanted to talk about was from Seattle Times, and it says, others who watch with more sense than adoration will likely be dumbfounded by the venal messages of pettiness and possession that the movie honors above all else, which frustrated me because, like yours, I think it is misunderstanding the movie. I think what it's trying to say is that the movie honors things that girls typically like, and it's conflating those things with pettiness and possession. The reviewer is sexist, basically, is what it's saying. Yeah, I have nothing more to say. It's just you don't understand the movie.
Yeah.
But I mean,
we get it.
Let's just get into it for ourselves. Yeah. So since we get it, let's talk about it.
But yeah, we open on Pink Comic Sans. An iconic typeface if I've ever seen one.
Not gonna lie, that did make me nervous. I was a little bit worried for a second. But you know what? I learned my lesson. It just goes to show you shouldn't judge a movie by its font choice.
But we open on the very first day of their freshman year and they're waking up.
All energetic.
Yeah. And they're immediately getting on video chat with each other to get ready. Thoughts?
There's so much going on in a good way. I think the movie does a great job of immediately setting a very distinct tone visually. There's this sweeping shot up to the alarm clock and this mystical music in the background, and once the girls are all up and getting ready, we see each of their rooms, and the set design is so eye-catching. Each room is decorated so differently, and it's so vibrant, and I just immediately love that as a celebration of the things that girls like and what girls can be, and it's just so fun to see.
I love that each of the bedrooms are tailored to the characters, which is very, true to life, and so much better set design than you would get these days, which I sound like a old curmudgeon, but I hate shitty minimalist set design, and this is the opposite of that. But not only that, but even if this was made in the generation of like minimalism and blah blah blah. You cannot take away this kind of room from a teenage girl. Like a girl's family might be into like all grace or whatever. Her room is still gonna be covered in like magazine clippings and shit. I mean, this is generalizing. Obviously, doesn't mean like if you're a girl you have to do this. I'm saying like it's a common experience. And I love how their rooms look like they could be like little doll houses.
Yeah, you're right. That's such a great way of honoring the source material without, explicitly trying to sell you stuff. Throughout the movie, I almost forgot that this was based on dolls. Like, I never felt like they were trying to sell me the dolls. I feel like I would be very aware of that, definitely much more aware than the typical 8-year-old about, product placement and
Advertising.
Yes, advertising. Yeah, it feels like such a nice touch.
Yeah, it's definitely coming from an artistic intention, but I do like how they talk to each other, and it's kind of clear that they're all friends. Like, I buy it. It's a little like for kids kind of, like the dialogue in this part, but I buy it. I think it has a lot to do with the chemistry between these 4 girls. They're great together in terms of like their chemistry and their acting with each other. They gel, like it works. I buy it.
Yeah, there's a little bit too much talking in sync for my taste, but yes. Overall, totally agreed. I didn't question for a minute that they were, lifelong friends. I mean, I guess it's excusable, like the dialogue being a little bit on the nose considering the target audience, but it doesn't get tiring for some. Like, it's fun because there's so many absurd things going on in this movie. I feel like if you're an older viewer, this just leans into that.
Yeah, everything is so heightened that this way of speaking in this opening scene fits in quite well. And it's even more so convincing later on, their relationship and their history when they are talking absolute shit about each other. Like, the way they speak to each other, especially when they're not being very nice, it's only the kind of way you could speak with, like, your friend who you grew up with, or, like, who you know very well. And this opening scene isn't as strong, but I do like what we get here.
Yeah, it's very fun.
But so we start getting little glimpses of each of their lives. Yasmin has a little brother who is very into doing his hair. She lives with her grandmother and
a mariachi band.
But yeah, they're all from different cultural backgrounds, and I mean, this is maybe just because of the time or whatever, but we talked about this when we were watching it. Not sure if it's offensive.
Yeah. I do think some of it is stereotypical, but it's only at certain points where it's kind of towing the line and potentially crossing the line. But other than that, it's really nice to see a diverse cast of characters, and it's not their entire personalities. In a way, it does more for diversity than a lot of media does today when it's consciously trying to be more inclusive, but it just comes across as virtue signaling. I feel like this movie is doing more for diversity and inclusion, even with its stereotypes, which I'm not excusing.
And doing it with the most rancid stereotypes. I will have to say that.
Well, like I said, disclaimer, not excusing it.
Yeah, of course. And then there is Sasha, whose parents are divorced, and she is staying at her dad's at the moment, and he seems incompetent. Sasha's dad invented weaponized incompetence. He can't work the toaster in his own home, and she's kind of like the go-between between her parents. And we meet Jade and her parents while they're dropping her off at school, and she's very brainy, and her mom is reciting her schedule, and it's all packed. And we also see Chloe, who's going to school on her bike, and she's a little all over the place because she drops her bike and everything falls. And Olivia from Lemonade Mouth could never make that much of a mess.
It's interesting you bring up Lemonade Mouth because this scene reminded me of the same scene in Lemonade Mouth where they're all being dropped off by their parents. And I liked this scene much better because the whole exposition moves the story along while we're learning about each character, because we see Yasmin and Sasha's families while they're still getting ready, and then they're at school when we see Jade being dropped off and Chloe arriving by herself. And I think it's much more dynamic and engaging and tells us a lot about the characters. So I definitely think this movie does a good job of, moving the story along while we're still learning about the characters' family lives.
For sure. And so obviously they congregate in front of the school, do a little huddle, and they talk about each other's interests and support each other. And it's very, hyped up and stuff, but it's still cute. I don't know. I feel like middle schoolers / just out of middle school kids sometimes do talk like that.
And I mean, it is very relatable and realistic that they're all talking about their plans for the year. Like, this is their support system. You can tell that they rely on each other and support each other, and it's just very nice to see positive female friendships on screen. It feels like a very rare thing.
I also really like I said, the way they speak and vocalize like how much they support each other and how that's kind of childlike, and how it's contrasted to how they are later, since there's a big time jump, and how this is like right before they go into high school, literally. And even though they are still very energetic later, it is quite different.
Yeah, you're right. It's a really stark contrast. And a big reason why they end up that way after 2 years at the school is because this is an interesting school.
The school of life, you might say.
Yeah. I mean, on the surface, it feels very absurd because the movie is very upfront about the fact that there are many parallels with prison, which sounds absurd to say, but actually, under the surface, I feel like it does say a lot about certain institutions in society, but I'll get into my deep thoughts later. But I just wanted to say, I love the introduction to the school because we get this very upbeat music interspersed with shots of sinister signs commanding students to obey and submit and listen. And the students are all just hanging out, doing their own thing while we see CCTV cameras watching their every move. It is so jarring, but it also sets up the themes of the movie really well.
And we learn that the person who basically is running this whole show is Meredith, who is, to use your words, Sharpay on steroids. Your exact words, let me say.
She very particularly reminds me of High School Musical 2 Sharpay, with the entitlement and the abuse of authority and all of that stuff.
Actually, this is a really interesting complex behind the whole idea, I guess, is, first of all, we're introduced to a lot of things here. People are lining up to get assigned to their tables, like in the quad or whatever. So there are these cliques that everyone needs to belong to. And first of all, the clique types are hilarious.
Yeah.
And we are introduced to them in rapid succession. And it's just a very engaging sequence and I love it. And I love the way they shoot the sequence too, because every time Meredith is on screen, the angle is very exaggerated, like it's slanted, or it's not quite a Dutch angle, but it's definitely supposed to heighten the experience even more. And I really love how it's kind of framed at some points like she is helping people find others who have common interests, and how that hides her true intentions or like any negative effects it might have on the population. But of course, this is all done without any real smoke and mirrors, because the principal's there and he is our father and he has a book called How to Run a Prison. They talk about how like keeping people apart will make them have less power or something to that effect. But yeah, I really like how this search for control over a people or a society is represented in this school. And I guess there's my thesis statement that this is all supposed to stand in for, society at large.
Yeah. I mean, you hit upon everything that I wanted to mention. The scene is so great in the way that it balances the very absurd tone versus the message of the movie, whilst also keeping it all very lighthearted and fun. So yeah, we get the typical introduction to school cliques scene, but I feel like it's like kind of poking fun at how it's usually done, because we get these cliques that you would never hear of in other movies, like mimes and disco dorks and kids who like to dress as dinosaurs. I also love that visual of Meredith and her group looming so large on the screen, and it really hints at the insidious nature of her entire plan. It does highlight how institutions like schools often strive to strip people of their individuality and freedoms to maintain order, and it does reflect the predominant tendency in society to sort people into a lane as early in life as possible so that they can ultimately be productive cogs in the machine. So it's like it's heightened to the point where it seems ridiculous, but when you think about it, it's actually very interesting commentary. And that's what a good movie should be. It's talking about interesting things. It's more than it seems on the surface. And I don't understand how grown-up critics miss that.
Seriously. But yeah, the four girls walk right by, and Meredith and her cronies are kind of flabbergasted because no one has ever done that before. But the girls are trucking on. Jade goes to a chemistry class and performs magic because chemistry is not what she does. Sasha goes to a cheerleading auditions and immediately, right out the gate, is so mean to the captain, who's only asking if anyone will be able to do her routine. Also, the captain has a crown.
She's the equivalent of the British monarchy. Like, she doesn't actually have any power, but she's just there.
That's a great way of putting it, because they're the cheerleaders, so they do have social power over the student body.
Yeah.
Chloe tries out for the soccer team, commits a million fouls, but she gets in.
She has some fancy tricks up her jersey sleeve.
Yasmin stops by choir practice, but she does not audition or try to be part of it. She's too shy, and she bumps into another character who we'll learn is named Dylan, and he's deaf, and even after he tells her that he's deaf, she still says some real insensitive shit. And this is a great start to their relationship. I actually love this. Honestly, weirdly great representation for deaf people, as far as I understand. Like, he's a fully fleshed out character.
Yeah, from that perspective, yes. I feel like there are some glaring omissions, like the lack of any signing and the fact that he seems to be really good at lip reading to the point where he doesn't even need to be seeing people's lips to read them. That feels a little bit like a slightly easy fix. But putting those things aside, yes, he is a great character, and it's great that he calls her out on her ignorance immediately. That's the important part.
To me, what I especially like about this scene is the fact that she is being insensitive. Like, they are characterizing her character as someone who is insensitive. It's just realistic.
It's great to see some flaws, too.
Yeah. I was just gonna say about the bad lip reading. I think it's a matter of, like, them doing it poorly, because it's clear, like, it's part of the character that he's continually struggling and trying to lip read throughout the movie. Like, you can see it, him trying to follow people's mouths, but the actor who is in that scene, like, keeps forgetting that Dylan's character needs to read it.
Yeah. I just had one more point about this whole sequence where the girls are in school. It's very clear that the tone of this movie is meant to be very fun and unserious. And I read this one review that confused me very much because it said it's derivative stuff and played very straight despite its comical aspirations. This is Mean Girls without the irony. And this is from Time Out. And this confused me so much because this is a school that seems to be predominantly composed of extracurricular activities and very few actual classes. And the girls go in and immediately excel. And Jade is out there designing a whole dress for her teacher on the very first day. And this movie is full of irony.
Yeah.
Unless the critic went to a school where they had cliques where people dressed up as dinosaurs. They literally don't know what they're talking about. That they're literally not understanding the movie.
Literally, what they're saying is they need the characters to always be winking at the camera. And it's like, fuck off, first of all. But talking about Jade, we completely missed your favorite scene of all time in cinematic history. Would you like to set the scene?
Yeah, this happens right before the girls are about to go into school. Jade, having strict parents, hides her fashionista self from them. So before she goes in, she has to have an outfit change. And so the girls huddle around her so that she can change. And the entire time, we see scraps of fabric flying up in their face, and they are totally straight-faced while this is happening and discussing their plans for the year like nothing is out of the ordinary. And then she emerges in her fashionable outfit, including spontaneous highlights. It is wonderful. It is absurd, but so funny. It's so good. I don't know. This is like cardboard palace falling over level of funny.
Yes! From Barbie and the Nutcracker, if you missed that.
Yes. Now, I don't understand how people can miss the irony and miss the humor. It's in the plot, it's in the characterization, it's in the weird angles and the music, and the tone of the movie is so distinct and it's so strong that even when an aspect is not as strong, it still feeds into the overall tone of the movie. Like, tonally, it's such a strong movie.
Yeah.
One more thing that I want to bring up before we move on is the scene where Sasha is doing her fancy cheerleading moves. Upon a closer watch, you can definitely tell that it's not the actress for Sasha doing those moves, but not only that, it's very clearly someone of a different race. It's very clearly a white person.
I did not realize until you pointed that out, and it is definitely a light-skinned person. That's horrifying and hilarious. This movie is not low budget or anything, and they pull out all the stops for so many things, but not this.
It would have been a very easy fix, I'm sure, but...
Yeah. But yeah, they do eventually get to lunch, and their respective groups start calling them over, and we quickly get this montage of them on their video calls, their 4-way video calls, trying to schedule, times that they can hang out, and they keep missing each other and not making time for each other, and then getting into fights about not making time for each other. And we see one instance when Yasmin goes over to Sasha's place thinking that they had a shopping date, only to find Sasha is actually hanging out with her cheerleader friends that day, and Sasha brushes her off. And it's upsetting. And the next thing you know, it's 2 years later. Insane time jump.
I was so caught off guard when the text came up. I was shocked. I was devastated. It's like I went back to my middle school years and I was like, does that really happen to your friendships when you go to high school? Like, I had never experienced ups and downs in friendships. But I feel like maybe that's an indication of how impactful this movie actually is, that it hit me hard. I really like the sequence leading up to this time jump. The fact that they were always on video call, which just goes to show that they're not meeting up in person anymore. And when we see visually them all on screen, kind of talking straight ahead, it feels like they're talking at each other and not with each other. And I love that the last line before the time jump is "call me," like Yasmin telling Sasha, "call me," and then that's it. And I feel like it kind of is a realistic depiction of how friendships can seemingly grow apart overnight, and stuff like this happens. Like, you just stop talking one day, and then next thing you know, it's 2 years later.
Yeah. Oh, that hurts. On a lighter note, I really like the look of their video chat during this montage. I think it's because the set design is very of its time. I mean, I know I said that it's timeless for a teenage girl's bedroom, and it is, but it also is still of its time. And so the look of the screen and the video chatting, it just fits in, and it never really looks dated. If anything, it looks like, if you didn't know that this was from 2007, you could possibly think that it's made now to replicate something that would happen in the 2000s.
Right.
So I really like that as well. Like, I don't know, I just really like the video chat thing. Like, it works on a generational level. Like, it bakes this movie within its time period in a good way instead of dating it. And it kind of captures a certain relationship in time. Like, this isn't happening in the 80s. This isn't happening now. This is happening when it was. And this is what it was like to have friendships then. And especially female friendships, or like not necessarily just female friendships, but, friendships where you want to show off, what you might want to wear to school that day or whatever.
Yeah. Just before we move on, I just wanted to say the fact that we only get to see one day in school and then immediately the girls' friendship is basically over, I feel like highlights how insidious Meredith's system really is, because it implements itself without much need for her interference. Again, it's a reflection of how society works in general, with our immediate relationships and interactions being determined by the work we do, whether it's by choice or not, unless we make a conscious effort to go out of our way to break out of the patterns dictated by society. And even then, that's not a choice everyone can make. Some people don't have that liberty to break out of the patterns.
That is definitely what the movie is saying. But also, Meredith says it herself. She explicitly says, my system is flawless, or something to that effect, and that it'll do its job for her. And like you said, we only see their very first day of school, and so after the time jump, it is also their very first day as juniors. And they're much more grown up now. They drive their own vehicles to school. Some of them are much more outgoing. They have their own circles. Except for Yasmin, it seems like she's kind of kept to herself. So my take on this, or not my take on this, what the movie is saying is, this entry to high school is basically leaving their adolescence, the entry to adulthood, where you have so many more things demanding your attention and your time, basically exactly as you said. And I think that's why, for me, it was really important and interesting how childlike their interactions were before and how changed it is now, because it's supposed to be like a difference between their adolescence and adulthood. They also act and look quite older after this time jump, and the girls don't even talk to each other.
Yeah. I really like that Yasmin hasn't really assimilated into any of the groups. It feels like a representation of the people who don't immediately find their paths and might feel like they're being left behind by their peers. And maybe they're sort of half-heartedly in a group that they don't really want to be in. Like, we keep seeing people saying Yasmin is in journalism, but I think maybe it is a conscious choice to not show us her ever being a part of that group because she doesn't want to be there.
You're right. That's a great point. We also see her run into Jade at one point at this assembly, and it's so like awkward between them because they're like ex-friends who don't really speak anymore, but they used to be like close, like besties close. And I really like this scene. It's so real and so sad, especially like you see the clear longing in Yasmin to be close to Jade again.
Yeah, and they both get excited over this lip gloss, and I think it is sweet to see that that's what they connect on, because it's something that's usually considered superficial and kind of seen in a negative light. I'm talking about makeup, but it can be a positive point of connection between people, and especially between young girls, and that's perfectly fine. Like, again, this is the movie representing typically feminine things in a, like, not even in a positive light necessarily, in a neutral light. It just is something that they're interested in, and it's not because they're girls, it's not because they're young, it's not because they're superficial or they're stupid. It's just something that they connect on and then they move on, and it's so nice to see something like that, because again, it's missing in a lot of other media that we consume, which typically tends to look down on things like this.
Yeah. But yeah, so at this assembly, Meredith, the student body president, is announcing their yearly talent show. And this year, the winner will win a college scholarship. And this will be a big part of the movie, so keep it in mind. We learn more about Meredith's life. She lives in seemingly a mansion. She has a little sister who dislikes her. I love the dynamic between them.
I was gonna say, that's an understatement, because the first time we see them on screen together, they are absolutely roasting each other. It is so funny. her sister, I think her name is Cherish. Feels like Cherish is like a comedian doing a set and the whole thing is just roasting her sister.
I actually love how, even though Cherish is also very heightened and, you know, she's making clips left and right, when she's with Meredith, she is the straight man. Because Meredith is doing these outrageous things. And Cherish, her roast is from the perspective of the straight man, and it's hilarious. Also, I cannot believe we haven't mentioned Meredith's little dog, whose name is Paris. But my favorite thing happens in the scene because we keep seeing Paris with Meredith. Like, we see them getting salon treatments together later. But in the scene, Meredith is doing her hair in these big rolls. And she has a roll on Paris. But Paris is a short-haired dog. Or at least, like, the hair on her head is short. So it's just on top of her head. But Meredith shakes out her own hair and then she does the same to Paris, and it is so funny and it's so good. But there are so many of these gags throughout the movie whenever we get little glimpses into Meredith's life. But I would just like to point out this one because it is my favorite.
Yeah, it's so funny. And again, it really adds to the movie's absurd tone while also telling us more about Meredith's character, because more often than not, we see Meredith treating Paris like they're besties while she has actual people around her who are supposed to be her friends who are treated much less nicely. Because Paris is like her only friend, it feels like at times, because they even wear matching outfits and everything.
They do. It's really interesting that she treats Paris as her best friend and like an equal, completely unaware of the fact that she has complete control of Paris and her well-being.
Speaking of her power, actually, it's very subtly slipped in during the assembly that she's once again the student body president, and it's very much screaming dictatorship rather than democratically elected president.
Yeah, and it's all over the movie. They spell it out for us. They have these statues of these figures looming over the school. They have statues of the principal. They have statues of what looks like this old woman who keeps showing up everywhere, and she has a gavel or axe or something. So it's definitely there in the text and not hidden at all.
But yeah, I mean, given the amount of authority that Meredith has and the way that she's misusing it, it's very interesting to see her characterization, like the way that she's presented otherwise, like visually, because when she's on screen, we often get this dreamy music, and it's such a fun juxtaposition with how unhinged she is. It's so fun. And I feel like this is where her portrayal kind of diverges from Sharpay a little bit, because while Sharpay is fun in her own way, it's kind of, it can get a little bit one note, but with Meredith, there's this really fun like duality to her portrayal, and the result is this really fun contrast between how she looks and how she's presented versus what she's actually doing.
And with the music always coming in when we see glimpses of her life, it really feels like they're trying to convey what is happening in her head. Like, we see how ridiculous it is, but in her head, spa music is playing, you know?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
I mean, same goes with, you know, the other non-spa scenes. I mean, even the parts where she's being menacing and she's coming up with these insidious plans. There's this intense music that will crop up. And even that, it's like in her head, this is the gravity of her action.
Yeah, and coupled with the really intense angles that we get, like this really close-up shot whenever she pulls out the USB of doom. It's so funny.
Yes. So Meredith is discussing the talent show with her cronies. And they're talking about how Meredith will definitely win, blah, blah, blah. But this is when she sees that Chloe and a guy who's part of her group / someone she makes out with sometimes, named Cameron, who we have seen has been eyeing Chloe this whole time. They're talking on the stairs, and Meredith doesn't like that. So she sends Paris off to interfere. And Chloe ends up tripping on Paris and dropping her lunch over the banister, and Jade just happens to pass by underneath. And so she gets spaghetti all over her, and Jade immediately is angry. I mean, understandably. And she trips on a bunch of spaghetti and ends up spilling a bunch of lunch on Sasha, who she ends up sending a skateboard Yasmin's way, who then falls on her own food, and they all get into a fight, and then a food fight breaks out across the whole cafeteria, and they are trash talking each other this entire time.
Yeah.
And they are not holding back. It's not as bad as it will get later, but it's clear that they know each other. You know, they've been friends.
Yeah.
I also love how Meredith is looking pristine in the midst of all this and cartoonishly dodging the food. It is so funny. And she's also shot from like way below. It is so tight. They never miss with the tone. Like, they know exactly what they're trying to do with every single shot and scene.
Totally agree. Especially the part with Meredith is like the epitome of divide and conquer, and like showing us how even when the general population is breaking out into conflict, she is completely unaffected because she's not one of them. She is the one ruling over them. And with the girls immediately getting into an argument, like you said, you can definitely tell that not only are they close, but that their relationship has developed a lot over these last 2 years, and the fact that they've built up a lot of resentment for each other. But I wish that their relationships with the other characters had been developed a bit more, because when we see, for example, Chloe and Cameron interact, it still feels like they're still in their freshman year, like just getting to know each other. They don't interact like people who've known each other for 2 years. And this is coupled with the fact that we only see one day of their freshman year. It kind of feels like they've only been at school for a few days. And to indicate time passing, I wish that they had developed these other relationships a bit more as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. That is one of the biggest weaknesses of this movie, I would say. But also, now that you mention it, I wish we had also seen them with other actual friends, not just like the cliques. I know that we get a more fleshed out relationship between Jade and the guy that was in her chemistry class. Like, it does seem like they've been friends, like they know each other. But I can't say the same for the other characters. It's weird that it doesn't actually seem like they drifted apart and replaced each other with new friends. So I wish we had gone like actual new friends of theirs.
That's a good point. A part of me is like, maybe it was sort of intentional in the fact that they're not friends with these people because they necessarily like each other. It's just that they happen to have the same interests. It's like when you're friends with your coworkers, you see each other every day, so you're on friendly terms, hopefully. But it would be nice if maybe once they break out of these cliques and they start to mingle around a bit more, that's when they get to know the people in their cliques as well on a more personal level. And that's when they're like talking about things beyond cheerleading or football and stuff like that.
I think I find it less meaningful if like they didn't actually like replace their friendships with each other. Like it's less impactful. It's one thing for it to be the kind of analogy of like, oh, I'm just so busy with work that I can't even find time to keep up with my friends. That's definitely part of it, but it's different to keeping people apart and only socializing within their groups so that people can't like get together and gain more power. You know what I'm saying? And I'll get into this more in the next scene because there's a great line about it, but that's how I see it, at least.
I see what you're saying. I think it is more impactful in terms of the way that they portray the friendships, because it is hurtful to see, you know, your former best friends replace you with other friends that they're actually really close to. But I do still think that it works because the system isn't necessarily designed to form genuine bonds. It's a way of controlling people and keeping them within certain confines. And if you're lucky, you might find people that you form genuine connections with, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes it is very like superficial.
Yeah. But the four girls actually get into trouble because at one point they're circling this bust of the principal and it topples over and they get blamed for it.
They get detention. And it's so funny to me that detention is just them sitting alone in an empty room and not like supervised by a teacher or having any kind of punishment. They're just sitting there like they're on timeout or something.
I thought you were going to talk about the levels.
You know what? I did not notice the levels, which I am shocked by. I am ashamed of myself. But now that you mention it, it is interesting composition. They're all scattered around the classroom and on different levels, which, shows how they are not on the same page in terms of their friendship, and they break out into an argument and blame each other for drifting apart. And things get very heated and very intense quickly, but Yasmin kind of calms them down and helps them reconcile.
Yeah. The way you described that fight was so subdued. They say some mean shit to each other. I love it. Like, these are real people. These are real teenagers saying heinous shit to their friends who they've seen, like, go through, hard times, and they know exactly what to say to get under their skin. And, like, I also like how it's not necessarily just about, oh, I want to get under your skin, so I will say this really shitty thing. It's that it's coming from very specific people. Like, Sasha says some stuff about Chloe's socioeconomic background, and she's saying that because it is part of her, like, blind spot. Like, she's supposed to be this really well-off kid, like, who has a really rich dad, and it's like a flaw of hers that kind of shit can leave her mouth. And same goes with the other bullshit that each of them say. It's not like, oh, what can we say to Yasmin that will hurt her? It's like, oh, what can Jade say to Yasmin that will hurt her? These dynamics are so thought through, and it's really good. And they talk it out, and they talk about how, Yasmin especially, talk about how they've been isolated in their own cliques, and make a jab at Jade's friends because they're all like nerds and stuff. And Jade is like, look, they're really interesting people, okay? Like, you just don't know them like that. And Yasmin's like, that's the fucking point. Since they can't mingle, they can't see people in other groups as three-dimensional people. It's basically like the whole thread of the movie, right? You are sequestered into these groups so that you can never see other people as anything but their, like, stereotype or just like one thing that you believe about them, and you can't truly see them as full humans, and you can't fully sympathize with them, you can't connect with them. And unless you actually make connections with people who are different from you, this kind of mindset will never change. And that's just so fucking great.
That's a really great point. I mean, multiple great points. And to add on to that, I think this movie does a lot to also humanize teenage girls or teenagers in general. Like, I feel like maybe especially girls have this reputation, among grown-ups or people of different generations who look down on them for finding their life experiences challenging, because they're always like, oh, high school is the easiest part of your life. Wait until you get into the real world. Wait until you have real problems. But this kind of story does show that their life experiences are not only valid, but that they can also be translated into experiences any of us have at any point in our lives. And the fact that specifically these characters like shopping or makeup or, girly things doesn't take away from the fact that they are fully fleshed out characters with interesting problems and distinct personalities. And I think it's great writing to balance the messages and the characterization and everything.
That's actually a great point, because, like, especially with this fight that we're talking about, a lot of times you hear people call girls catty or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's not catty. Girls are human beings who have problems and fight like any other human. But yeah, so, like, you're right now that you put it that way. This is such a humanizing portrayal of girls fighting and being mean.
Just girls existing, girls living their lives.
Anyway, so that's also kind of why I'm of the opinion that they did find, like, new friends, because the point of the, system is that they don't get to see other people who are not like them as fellow, like, humans with multiple interests and, compassion and flaws and whatever else. But anyway, Meredith is actually spying on them and attention through all the CCTVs, and she threatens to use, gasp, the USB to fix this whole mess. So the way this is shot is very close up, and is actually a fisheye, and Meredith is smack dab in the middle, her face somewhat distorted, and in the periphery you can see her cronies reacting.
Yeah, I really like the way, I mean, every scene they shoot with Meredith in it is shot wonderfully, and I especially like the composition each time because Meredith is unfailingly in the middle. Even when at her birthday party she falls into the pool with her two cronies, her cronies are behind her, floating behind her. I really like that consistency, and I mean, it's not anything new, but I do like how consistent that is, even in the most absurd situations.
So Yasmin is ecstatic that her and her friends are back together, and she's dancing around in joy at home. She's in a bathrobe, she's got face mask on, and her grandmother joins her, and they're, singing their hearts out. And her little brother decides to film her because it's embarrassing, and he's a little brother, so of course.
Yeah. While I'm not a huge fan of the filming the embarrassing moment and later replaying it in front of everybody thing, that feels like too much of a cliche to me. I do like the fact that we see such vibrant family lives for each of these characters, and the fact that their families are not only there for them when things are going badly, they're also there when good things are happening and there to celebrate with them. I think it's so wholesome that the grandma is like dancing around with her because she's happy that, the kid has friends again. Like, this is great. And too often in stories like this, parents or guardians are barely involved in the story. They might even conveniently be killed off, just so they don't have to write these extra characters. But I love that they form a support system for the characters. It makes them feel that much more real. The grown-ups also have their own little quirks so that they don't feel like flat cardboard cutouts or anything.
Yeah. On the subject of their vibrant home lives, I really like how we also see so many different kinds of families. We see parents who are divorced, single mothers, Yasmin lives with her grandma, an interracial couple, because Jade's mom is Asian and her dad is white, which, it sounds like it's not a big deal or whatever, but you don't see that many interracial couples in media.
Yeah, and the fact that they are represented on screen is a big deal, and what's an even bigger deal is that they don't make a big deal about it. It's all portrayed as completely natural, which it is. There are different types of families, there are different people in the world. I mean, ignoring the stereotypes, which are a problem, but putting those aside for a second, otherwise it's very natural.
Yeah, but the girls are back together, so they're shopping together, and they see Dylan actually out and about and thirst over him.
It feels very kind of realistic dialogue for high schoolers to be having, but also kind of fun and tongue-in-cheek because they talk about how he basically ignores her all the time, can't remember her name, they never interact. He must be in love with me.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
But there's this part where they're doing that thing again from the beginning where they're verbally really encouraging each other and sharing all the ups and downs of their lives. And there's a line where they're telling Jade how fashion is her superpower. And instead of being all humble, like, oh, stop it, guys, Jade is like, yeah, I am amazing. And it's too bad I have to hide how extraordinary I am. And it was funny in the moment, but when I think about it, it's nice to see female characters who are allowed to be unapologetically proud of themselves and their skills because, we're often expected to be humble and, not accept praise and kind of deflect it back onto the person who's giving it to us. We're not expected to know it already, the fact that we're good at something or whatever. So it was really nice to see a character like that. The more I talk about this movie, the more I'm like, this is kind of healing. This is kind of a healing story. Because I'm like, it would have been great for younger me to have experienced more stories like this.
Yeah. It's also so unapologetic about what it's doing.
It's totally in your face and girly and, feminine with reckless abandon.
Actually, it's kind of like what we said about Barbie in The Princess and the Pauper, because we were talking about how the movie is specifically targeted toward young girls, so they don't feel the need to add on a bunch of caveats or whatever that will appease any other viewer, and it ends up letting them tell a really great story without any perceived possible prejudice weighing them down. It feels like it's a similar thing here.
That is a great comparison. That is exactly what it is. Just goes to show how well you can do, how great a story you can craft when you put aside all that other bullshit.
Yeah. But auditions have started up. Meredith is seeing all of these different students, and we see boy bands, we see magic shows, we see dancers, incredible performers. She keeps turning them down, and this is how she's rigging the competition. She's only letting through the bad candidates so that she will be the obvious winner.
Yeah.
There's this one very brief scene of the principal being so preoccupied with fixing the nose on his statue because it's been put back together after it was shattered. And literally on my notes just read, symbolism, question mark, question mark, question mark.
My notes too. I wrote that I like the cracks in the bust as a symbol of the dominating authority's power being irreversibly damaged. But more importantly, it's so funny.
It is.
To see him continuously try to fix the nose and it keeps turning crooked again. I mean, it's also kind of like it emphasizes his role as the figurehead, as you said, because he's so preoccupied with the appearance of authority that he's completely, or well, maybe he's aware, but in that moment, he's completely unaware of his authority being undermined continuously by his daughter. Like, he's not even in charge anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Like, this scene to me was him being so fixated on the appearance of his authority, but also the appearance of legitimacy, because he keeps straightening the nose, right? To make it look the way it's supposed to, instead of it lying crooked, because he is crooked. He's corrupt. And the fact that he doesn't have control over it, it's like the bust is telling of his character and position.
Yes.
And it's just very funny. And it's like, it doesn't fucking matter that he's a bumbling idiot or like a sweet old man. This is like the sweet old man effect all over again. He's still what he is, you know.
You're right. I mean, there are certain scenes where he comes across as very almost lonely and you kind of feel bad for him. Like during Meredith's party, he's hanging out in a corner all by himself and you start to feel bad. But you're right. That is a great point because ultimately he is complicit in what's going on at the school, even though he might also be a victim in certain ways, a victim of his daughter's oppression. He is still complicit in it.
Yeah.
At this point, the girls have made a plan to not only start hanging out with each other again, but they want to take control of their friendships. And they start hanging out with people in each other's groups. And Sasha starts giving makeovers, and Yasmin teaches one of the jocks how to walk in high heels. And Jade offers tutoring classes, and Chloe takes revenge on mansplainers. I didn't know what she was contributing, but this is the part where Cameron is trying to teach a football star how to play football, and she subtly tells him she knows what she's doing.
Yeah. But we actually get another glimpse into Meredith's life. We are at her mansion again, and she's in the pool.
I just love the overhead shot of Meredith that we get while she's floating in her pool. It was so reminiscent of Sharpay in Fabulous. And with the music, again, it establishes such a serene atmosphere, which is, again, a great juxtaposition with her scheming.
Yes.
So Meredith is convinced that everyone hanging out with each other is just a temporary lapse in her power. And she thinks back to when she last had authority, and that was right before her Sweet 16 birthday party because everyone was following her rules so that they would get invited. So to gain power back, she decides to throw another Sweet 16 party to force the students back into their cliques and regain control. And I love the fact that it's not just, I'm gonna throw another party. It's, I'm gonna throw another Sweet 16 party.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that scene in another Cinderella story where Dominique was throwing another birthday party for her kids and she was like, you will keep turning 15 or 16 or whatever it is until I tell you to stop. And, you know, says a lot about wealth and aging and there's stuff there.
Yeah, it says a lot about power and, societal power, especially with something like a Sweet 16. And that's what Meredith is doing here as well, right? Because she's like, I am most powerful when I'm most liked and popular. Like, these things are intertwined. And she also decides to get MTV to cover it because her mom is best friends with an MTV producer, which speaks to the nepotism that's at play here. Because she has the power that she does at school because of her dad. She can get an MTV to cover her Sweet 16 because of her mother. And again, it paints a picture of wealth and success as this thing that you can easily achieve when you are already in a certain place in life.
Very true.
But Yasmin's brother shows up to hit on Cherish. And when Meredith realizes who he is, she kind of sweet talks him into sharing dirt on Yasmin, and he ends up sharing the quote-unquote embarrassing video of Yasmin with her. And first of all, we learn the significance of the USB, because this is when we learn that is where she keeps all of her dirt.
Can I just say, at the mention of the USB, when she brings it out, even the dog sits up at the side of it. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Second, he has a flip phone that has a USB slot. The way that this scene and this specific technology has haunted me since 2007, almost 20 years now. It's incredible. I would like that phone, please, and thank you.
It was interesting that, I understand Meredith's immediate inclination to dig up dirt about Yasmin because that seems like what she does with everybody. I think it would have been interesting if they emphasized Yasmin's role in being a direct threat to Meredith because, the girls are already threatening to topple her authority, but especially Yasmin, I feel like, is the biggest threat because she's the one who didn't feel inclined to join any of the groups at school. She's the only one who hasn't really assimilated, whereas her friends kind of have. And I think maybe all the pieces would have fit together a little, just a tad more perfectly if Meredith pinpoints Yasmin as her target. And that's what drives her to try and get some dirt.
No, yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about it that way. So Meredith has announced her Sweet 16 party, so the girls are shopping for it.
With the whole shopping montage and the girls picking out outfits and putting on makeup, I think it might be scenes like this that make other people think that this movie is vapid and superficial, but we've already talked about how the movie includes stuff like this without passing any judgment on it. And I think when you are speaking to a target audience, it makes sense to speak to them via the things that they know and love. And while shopping might not be considered an intellectual activity, it is the basis of many young people's friendships, and it's a core bonding activity. And there doesn't have to be anything beyond that. And that being said, as a reminder of the review that I mentioned, obviously the promotion of overconsumption isn't great, but I don't think this movie is doing that. I think the emphasis is more on the friendship and the experience of navigating a life together. It's not the shopping. The shopping's not the point.
But also, people shop. It's a weird thing to take this and be like, oh, this is a vapid thing. And it's like, that's false and falsely fueled by certain prejudices. It doesn't even make any sense. Even the overconsumption thing, I just, they go shopping when they need to, like other humans.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, all of this is for naught because once they get the invites, they realize that they will be assigned tables with their respective cliques and they don't want to be part of that, so they decide not to go. On the other hand, we see Meredith also getting ready for this party and she's getting many petties alongside Paris. We get a whole sequence of her photo shoot as well, and it's so fun. It's great.
I do think it's telling that she's going through this entire process by herself. And for someone who's supposed to be a popular person, she isn't actually very popular. She isn't surrounded by a group of friends or anything. And even her posse isn't around at significant moments. It's just her and her dog. So next up, we have this scene where Yasmin is practicing singing and Dylan comes across her. So to give context to this scene, Dylan apparently is interested in music, but he hasn't been able to pursue it since he became deaf. And earlier on, we had this scene where he was trying to play the piano, but he can't hear what he's playing and he's very frustrated. And the music teacher helps him reconnect with music in a different way. Like, he shows him that you can put your hands on the speakers and feel the beat of the music. And he also encourages him to try mixing. And so that resurfaces in this scene here, where he tells Yasmin that she sings really well and that she should perform at the talent show. And he says if she sings, he'll mix. But of course, she's reluctant because she's got stage fright. Here is another point, I think, where the portrayal of deafness is a little bit off, because it's great that they show a different way for him to get involved in music, but when he puts his hands on the speakers while she's singing, they kind of make it seem like he can tell that she sings really well, but I don't think that's quite how that works.
I don't think so either. I mean, I don't know that the movie thinks so either, but I really like how they never walk on eggshells around the fact that he's deaf, because when he tells her, you've got a great voice or whatever, she's like, how would you know? And then he shows her the thing that the teacher showed him with the vibrations on the speaker.
Yeah.
The scene also ends with him showing her this sign that says, go for it. That was nice. I really like the scene with the teacher. It makes me tear up because, like, it didn't occur to me until you mentioned it, but I didn't realize that he might have an interest in music per se, just that he says he misses music.
I thought he meant like he misses playing the piano.
Which can very well be what's happening in the scene. But I had always just taken it as, like, he misses just listening to music. And it's just such a human experience. And it's so heartbreaking because we can all understand. It's something so intrinsic to humanity, right? Enjoying music. So in an instant, we can understand his frustration and his longing. And it's so sad. And the way the teacher just immediately swoops in, like, no, I'll show you. There's always a way to, like, still hear music, quote unquote. It was just so sweet. And he looks so happy when he realizes that he can feel the vibrations.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It was so nice to see that the secondary characters also get their own backstories and arcs. And the only complaint I had about the scene is that it felt a little bit disconnected from the main storyline. It's less to do with his development as a character and more to do with him later on encouraging Yasmin and playing a part in their performance. I mean, it's still a great way of developing his character, but a part of me feels like it's not there for him, but to serve the main characters.
I feel similarly, not quite the same, but my thing is that it feels like later on he kind of disappears into the background. Like, we don't really see him as a fully fleshed out character anymore. Like, he's just always around and that's it.
Yeah, it started and ended in that one scene. I was gonna say maybe it's the placement of the scene in the whole story, but maybe it's also the fact that it's just the one scene. It could have been integrated into the story a little bit better.
I don't think it's just the one scene. Like, I think the other scenes previous were, like, contributing to it. But I do agree that it ends very prematurely, and I wish later on he had more of a role or something. I don't know. I just wish he'd stayed a character, because basically he's not a character for the rest of the movie.
So at this point, Chloe comes home to find that her mom is sick, and she has been working on this catering job, but obviously now she can't. So Chloe recruits her friends to complete the job without knowing that it's supposed to be for Meredith's Sweet 16 party. By some miracle, they managed to make a certain amount of food. We don't know if it's sufficient for the entire party, but
another hurdle. Apparently the server is canceled, so the girls have to step in lest they get fired. And Meredith has dressed them as clowns to humiliate them, I guess. I do wonder, like, when this was decided.
a part of me does want to believe that she has an emergency stash of clown outfits at home, just in case she gets the chance to humiliate someone.
Yeah, that does sound unhinged enough for Meredith. But the girls have a trick up their sleeves, or rather, Jade has a sewing machine up her purse.
It's small enough to be hidden up her sleeve.
Always wanted the sewing machine thing. Like, it looks so convenient.
It does. And I mean, it comes in handy in this emergency situation because she absolutely tears up the clown outfits and makes shiny new outfits out of them somehow. About as miraculous as the t-shirt into dress scene from Aquamarine.
Yeah.
And Sasha also contributes her makeup skills, and the girls end up looking amazing.
Quite chic.
Yeah, and this scene is deranged in the best way possible. I love that shot of Jade just grinning maniacally while she's tearing up the clown outfits. It is amazing.
They make the sequence into like leaning into the horror of clowns.
That's a great point.
They turn it into kind of like a fun house horror sequence, and they're doing these really tight shots of the girls looking intense.
I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I cannot tell the girls apart with the clown makeup on. So I think that makes it also a little bit unsettling.
Anyway, the party commences. Meredith enters the party on an elephant. However, the girls come out at the same time in their cool clown chic looks, and Meredith is getting pissy that she is not the center of attention and ends up threatening Chloe. Tells her to stay in line unless she wants her mom to get fired again, is what she says.
A little bit of mystery there, but again, we see her abuse of authority.
But she does not lose the spotlight for long because she has a performance. And she starts it with saying, "Please hold your applause until the end." The performance is excellent. But after her performance, she calls up Yasmin, and Meredith then ends up showing the embarrassing video, and people start to laugh, but Dylan gets everyone to dance along instead, and Meredith is pissed about that.
Yeah. Everything she tries to do at this party seems to backfire on her, and I guess it just goes to show that it's the start of her losing her authority, because once again, she tries to draw the attention back to herself with an outfit change this time, and she's asking the crowd whether they're having a good time and aren't they so glad that they're here, and then she says something like,
"Don't you guys just love me?"
Yeah, and there is silence in the crowd, and it's so awkward, and you can see that this is the moment where it hits her that she's not exactly liked among the people. I think this was an interesting choice on their parts to have Meredith be a popular character who's actually not liked among people, because you can contrast her with other characters like, say, Regina George from Mean Girls, who was very much an icon that everyone wanted to emulate, or someone like Blair or Serena from Gossip Girl, where they are not only popular but also very much the center of people's attention and affection. But here we see someone who is actually very alone and very unpopular. And I think that's a more interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but perhaps this is the moment when she realizes that she is ruling by fear and not favor.
Yeah.
A quite significant start of her losing her power is that she tells Cameron off about talking to Chloe and then tells him to do something for her. And he says no. He says, "Shove it up your ass." He doesn't say that. He says no, and she's very upset about that. And it leads to her falling on her cake, pushing her two cronies into the pool, and then getting pushed into the pool herself.
By the elephant.
And she calls the girls brats.
Yeah, the start of something iconic. This part reminded me of the scene at the end of Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper, where Preminger is bested by the animals that he's been abusing and oppressing this whole time, and they're the ones who bring him to justice. This is kind of like a similar thing where the elephant that she's been smacking to take her places and that she's been basically using for her own purposes and to make her look good. That's when the elephant retaliates. It's like the final straw, I guess, that breaks the general population's back, including the elephant.
Yeah. And everyone's like laughing at her at this point. She loses the social currency that she has, right? The same way that Preminger does at the end of Princess and the Pauper. There's one scene that I want to talk about during the party between the dad and Cherish. And it's not anything super important, but it's a very quiet scene between them. And I don't even know if it's sweet, even though it might be. It's just it's interesting.
It's like they both understand what the other person is going through because they are both under Meredith's thumb. And it adds an interesting layer to the dad's character, definitely, because he's supposed to be her parent. He's supposed to be the one in charge. And yeah, it adds a layer of complexity to the parent-daughter relationships.
He's just so powerless, even in his position. And it feels like that's what Cherish is pitying him for.
Yeah, she's saying, you're a good dad, like trying to reassure him that you do have some authority when he really doesn't. And he's even wearing a ringleader outfit in the scene.
Yeah.
Which is extra ironic because, again, he has no power.
I think what's interesting about it too is that Cherish is dressed up like a clown because she's one of the servers. And she's like 8 years old or something. I can't tell. And he compliments her look and he says, you look as cute as a button. And I don't think I'm reading into this, but I feel like there's some commentary about the fact that she's a child and the difference between the way Meredith portrays herself in sometimes over-sexualized ways. Like in her photo shoot, she checks on the results and she's like, oh my god, I look so hot, etc., etc. And how fixated she is on how people perceive her. And obviously, like, teenagers see each other as like attractive and hot and sexy and they want themselves to look that way, but like this is happening not within a vacuum, right? And it's so interesting that there's this big hubbub behind them, this Sweet 16 that's like over the top and everything, and then there's this very quiet scene between the dad and Cherish, and he's specifically complimenting her on her very young and innocent beauty. He's also like aware that Meredith is trying to humiliate Cherish with this outfit, and he's trying to make up for it by calling her cute as a bun, and he's trying to appease her, and she is also appeasing him in return, calling him a good dad. And it's this very like interesting scene that is very brief. And I think the quietness of the scene is what makes it stand out so much.
Yeah, that is a really great read of that scene. It makes the relationship more complex, that Cherish is also the one who is comforting him, and given their appearance, if you take a step back, it's the clown comforting the ringleader, which is like a very interesting power dynamic, and they do a great job of representing it visually.
Yeah. So like all of these contradictions, you know, this incredible age difference between them, incredible power imbalance one way or another, the fact that one of them is a clown, one of them is a ringleader, like it all makes for such an interesting scene.
And they're brought to the same level. That's the interesting part.
Yeah! Anyway, we have to move on. Back at school, the cliques are back. It totally worked. Things were as they were, and people start going up to the girls and saying, listen, if you don't hang out with us all the time, we're gonna kick you out of whatever group you're in, which is insane. But also, you mentioned earlier how even the people who are oppressed by the system are guilty of upholding it, and this is a great parallel to that.
Yeah, you're right. That is a really great point. Again, we see how deeply rooted Meredith's system really is, that it sustains itself even if she's not directly involved. And
I think it's an interesting parallel, if not a perfect one, because in this case, it's clear who's in the right. Like the kids are being ridiculous. But it is an interesting parallel to how in the real world, people who break out of their certain groups are maybe seen as rejecting those groups when that is not necessarily the case, and how it creates for more division instead. And that's only the case because we live within the system that encourages these groups, right? These divisions. So like, while the feeling may be real and valid to think like because someone is, you know, deviating or whatever, it feels like they're rejecting their origins or their groups or whatever. That is only creating further separation to act like that is a rejection of their selves or whatever. And all of this is working in service of the system, right? The fact that we see this happening here, even though obviously not with the same complexity, is interesting. interesting.
Yeah, I had a similar thought about the earlier scene where the girls first start to hang out together again and everyone is really shocked. And in the movie, it's exaggerated. You know, everyone comes to a halt and they're all staring at the girls and it feels like they're under a spotlight. But it is kind of a reflection of how it feels like trying to do anything, you know, quote, different in the real world. It really does feel like everyone's eyes are on you and judging you for making choices that might be best for you. And yeah, similar to what you said, it's not as nuanced in the movie, but it definitely is trying to hold up a mirror to society.
For sure.
But the girls come up with another plan to try and get everyone back together again. And this time they plan to enter the talent competition and include everybody that Meredith rejected from the auditions. And they ask Yasmin if she'll be the main singer, I guess. And initially she's very reluctant, but they manage to convince her by reminding her that Chloe is very much in need of the scholarship prize, and that's what motivates her to agree. And next up we see this whole montage of them preparing their performance for the talent show.
I'm confused about why they don't have to audition.
Yeah, same.
And they're like, we have to include people who Meredith rejected. And it's like, well, she'll just reject them again. I don't get it. I really don't get this part of the story. Like, they never have to audition. It's just like a given that they're already in the talent show.
I agree. This was a confusing point to me. It would be funny if they figured out that Meredith had intentionally been excluding the really good acts, and so they went out of their way to audition very badly so that they could convince Meredith to let them in, and that's how they sneak their way into the talent competition.
Yeah, it's not like she knows how Yasmin sounds or whatever.
Yeah.
So what happens is one of the minions show Meredith the girls practicing, and Meredith, loses it. And in her desperation to get the Bratz, as they're calling themselves now, out of the talent show, she threatens Yasmin with the USB.
Dun dun dun.
The USB has dirt on all of them, but the most damning one, seemingly, is that while Chloe's mom worked for Meredith's family, things started going missing, and it's implied that she has something to do with it.
With all this blackmail on Chloe and also the other girls, Yasmin has no choice but to drop out of the talent show. So later that day, she goes to her friends and tells them that she's not doing this anymore. And they're obviously all very upset because they have been sacrificing their social standings and their grades, apparently.
Yeah, that part I'm like, maybe you shouldn't do this. Maybe you should keep up your grades.
For some reason, Yasmin doesn't tell them why she's doing this. She just pretends like she's the one who's gotten sick of this entire thing.
Yeah, she says it's not her thing. It's kind of stupid.
I don't understand. And this feels like one of the weakest points in the plot for me. It just feels like they're trying to create conflict for conflict's sake when it wasn't necessary, because even if she had told them what Meredith had said to her, they could have still had a difference of opinion where maybe her friends are still fine with going ahead, but she's like, no, I won't let her do this to you. I'm not gonna do it. That's conflict still. So they didn't need to have the forced misunderstanding.
Agreed. I do really like that the night of the talent show, basically Chloe's mom finds out what's going on, and she very reasonably talks them through thinking through this, and it's a very good moment for her. And also a good moment for the movie. Like, we never really forget that they're children, but this is one of the times we are especially reminded that they're children, especially because they're like hanging out in Chloe's room and they're just like sitting on like the bed and the floor, and then the mom comes in like so clearly an adult trying to like, okay, how do I explain this to a bunch of children?
Yeah.
And she does a good job. And it's clear in the scene that the girls they have so much growing up to do. And I don't mean that as a bad thing, just good character writing. Because faced with the mom and her explanations, they seem so naive and clueless and like children. And I like the scene.
That is a really great point. It's like the blind spot that you mentioned earlier, right? Sasha's blind spot when it comes to her friends' financial situations. This is like a blind spot for your immature teen teenager who is too focused on the immediate situation, the immediate conflict, to look at the bigger picture. And it's so realistic for a guardian to be able to see what's actually happening. And it's so nice to also see the parents, again, not only pop up in the story, but actually influence the plot and make a difference. They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
It's really great that they listen to Chloe's mom and take her advice, and they actually go to Yasmin's place to find out what really happened, and the truth comes out, as it could have all along, but it's delayed for no reason.
They decide to go ahead with it anyway.
Yeah, and so it's the night of the talent show, and all the acts are fails.
But we do get one incredible performance. I'm sorry, I'm such a Meredith stan. Meredith performs an excellent song, very of its time. She says, on MySpace, she has 10 million friends. Call me. BFFs till the end.
Love your recitation of it. Again, it reminds me so much of Sharpay in High School Musical 2, especially there's that lyric that's like, me, is so reminiscent of You Are the Music in Me, Sharpay's version.
I'm like not even like gassing this performance up. It's quite fun. She's putting on this almost vaudeville voice because the performance is also like themed after it, sort of, and her voice is like really played up. It's different than her previous singing voice. Like she is putting on a performance.
Yeah, but the thing is that the audience isn't into it at all. It is so interesting to see them refuse to play along anymore because, again, it's such a different depiction of popularity and really highlighting how authoritarian Meredith is, as absurd as that sounds. And even though they might have gone along with her schemes before, you can see that something definitely has shifted and they're not really buying into it anymore. They're not having it. They're all sitting there so straight-faced. It's so funny.
Yeah. But yeah, she's about to trigger the end of the show to get the winner announced when the Bratz come. And can I just say, they arrive like secret agents in trench coats, shadowed by a backlight with smoke over the streets. It's so funny. I love it.
It's great. Again, it's the movie leaning into the absurdity and really playing it up. And it's so playful and it's very fun. They also infiltrate the audience while Meredith is performing. Like they're spies or something. It'd be funny if they had walkie-talkies.
I wouldn't put it past them. It's impressive to me how often they play around with the medium and the genre throughout this movie. I think maybe because it's a pretty absurd comedic movie, and maybe that's what allows it to be as flexible as it is, you know, like throwing out references, switching between a still heightened but more grounded scene to, you know, Meredith's little sequences and something like this spy sequence and the clown horror thing. It's quite impressive how they can jump back and forth and do it quite well. Like, it's not jarring or anything.
Yeah, you're right. That's a really great observation. It just goes to show how well done it is that tonally the movie is so consistent and so cohesive as well. But yeah, the girls pop up right before the winner can be announced, and Meredith threatens them all with the USB, but they all stand up to her and they are completely fine with all the dirt being released, and everything does end up being okay. I think this is another slightly weak point in the story for me, because while I understand that there wasn't that much time to develop every single part of the story, it kind of does feel like there are barely any consequences to this huge looming threat that was foreshadowed throughout the entire movie. Like, for example, Meredith reveals that Jade has been leading this double life and she's not really who she says she is, and her parents find out that she's been, you know, a fashionista all along. Gasp, shock, horror. But they're immediately fine with it. And it's immediately revealed that Chloe wasn't stealing. It was Meredith's sister all along. And I mean, everything's just all fine and dandy within 2 minutes. It's all wrapped up very neatly, which again is verging a little bit on cliche.
As much as I love the sequence of audience members who start to rise up and confess their own secrets, I totally agree with you. I wish wish they had instead like decided earlier that they're gonna do the show anyway and tell Meredith, and Meredith unleashes her USB and it spreads around and they actually face consequences. Like Jade and her parents' relationship are in shambles, the mom is having trouble like finding work, blah blah blah, like all of these really serious consequences. And what they're showing instead is that these girls are willing to face those consequences and go through them. You know, like the fact that they can go through them and then bounce back, not that they can like defend themselves against them.
That would be so much better. But yeah, anyway, everything is fine. And so they perform on stage together with everybody. Any thoughts on their performance?
It's fine.
They're no Meredith.
They're not, okay? They're no Meredith. It's true. But it's fun. I remember liking it a lot as a kid, and I really enjoy it as an adult as well.
There is this part where they show photos and videos on screen behind the performance, and it was kind of reminiscent of the CCTV videos playing behind Meredith in her evil lair. And it was kind of like they're reclaiming their narratives and showing off their interests to emphasize their individuality rather than suppressing it. So I like that part of it. And yeah, I like that they also include everybody. It feels less contrived than, say, the final performance in High School Musical 2. This one feels more like planned ahead of time, and we're gonna, include everybody who was unfairly excluded. And compared to Meredith's, which felt very like they're all my background dancers and I'm the one in the focus, this feels much more like a collaborative sort of labor of love rather than I want to win.
I completely agree with you, but also it's just a talent show. They're not judging based on community.
I just mean it serves the story.
It does serve the story, yes. It's just like, it's not really a statement. It's like, it's a celebration, right? Of what they've managed to achieve and of their community and of the fact that they're not beholden to this rigid system anymore. But as I understand, it's supposed to be more of a statement, of a call to action, right, for their peers. And I think, you're gonna hate this, I think the performance during the Halloween bash in Lemonade Mouth does a better job of it. Like, I think what they do is more suited to the goal that they were going for. Whereas here, like, it just becomes a celebratory performance because it's like the end of the movie. Whereas I'm quite sure their goal was to stick it to Meredith and like to change the way things have been run and will be run. So in that sense, I think it gets a little muddled, but as a performance, I enjoyed it a lot. So the principal can't and won't, mostly won't, snub his own daughter, so he pronounces it a tie and gives the award to Meredith. However, his little noggin's still working. He gives the scholarship to the Bratz, which makes perfect sense because Meredith does not need a scholarship. And obviously the Bratz gives it to Chloe, and it's quite a sweet moment. And an MTV producer invites them to be a feature performer at a red carpet premiere, and they do it. You can see it in the credits.
I thought singing was just Yasmin's thing, but by the end, they're all like catapulted into singing careers. And it's like so weird because it didn't seem like that was their thing at all. And now it seems like they're stuck in it and they can't get out. They're like, oh no, we've accidentally become famous singers. I can't do cheerleading anymore.
They're trapped.
They form their own prison after they get out of high school prison. It's just the prison of fame.
The prison of their mind.
Well, on that note.
So, an absurd conclusion.
They're trapped in showbiz.
Yeah. Oh, I've got an absurd conclusion.
Hit me.
Jade is
Batman.
Amazing at carpentry because she
What?
built her own closet.
I was close with Batman. She's got a lair.
Yeah! It's her bat cave.
Oh, actually, I think I have another one. Meredith has an emergency stash of clown costumes that she keeps around just in case she needs to humble anyone at any point in time.
That's like the ace she always has.
Yeah.
So, have your opinions changed, and would you recommend this movie?
I did not go into this movie with that much of an opinion, but like I did say, I was a little bit worried at the beginning. I've had questionable movie opinions in the past, namely my shame New York Minute, which turned out to be absolutely awful. So even though I enjoyed this movie as a kid, I wasn't sure if it was gonna hold up. And the hot pink Comic Sans did not give me much confidence. But I am delighted to say that I was worried about nothing. I had a great time watching this movie. My opinion at this point is very positive, and I would absolutely recommend this movie. The overall consensus about this movie is not just a misunderstanding of what it's trying to say or be, it's literally ignoring really great filmmaking. It is too blinded by whatever reason and not able to see that in terms of characterization, in terms of cinematography, music, design, everything, costuming. This movie's so strong. It's actually so strong. And I would have to say just the absurd comic tone is my favorite part. I feel like it excels in so many directions. And I feel like it is a shame that it's been branded like it's some awful, like should have been direct-to-TV movie. Like, no, it deserves all the love. So yes, I definitely recommend it. What about you?
My opinions have changed. I've always liked this movie, but going in, I was kind of convinced that it was gonna be, like, not great. I was just so pleasantly surprised, and I was especially surprised by how they executed the movie. Like, the choices that they made, the fact that they pulled everything off. Everything they were trying to do, they excelled at it. That's good. It's great.
It feels so unfair that it's been vilified like this because I feel like we need more stories like this. We need more stories where, you know, a young female audience isn't talked down to, isn't demonized, isn't made to feel inferior just because they have certain interests. I mean, I'm feeling like this at my age, watching this, you know, way past my teens. And so imagine how healing stories like this could be to the actual target demographic. It's so important to have stories like this that don't judge such a huge part of the population. And it's so unfair that it's been given this awful reputation just because, you know, of certain aspects. And it's not even like it's being criticized for its weak points. It's just being completely misrepresented and misunderstood for parts that aren't even in the movie.
Yeah, it's just immediately dismissed. But it's interesting to me how much to you this movie is about the experience of girls or like female friendships and stuff, because obviously that's part of it, but like I didn't realize how this sounds so dumb, but I didn't realize how significant it is until like you mentioned it. But yeah, I definitely recommend this movie. I mean, like I already liked it and my opinions changed, so like, you know, get on it. Anyway, that's all for this movie. If you have any suggestions for movies we should discuss on the podcast, send them in at graveyard_slot on Instagram, the Graveyard Slot Podcast on Tumblr, or email us at thegraveyardslot@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Graveyard Slot.